All right, I'm back with a another video here, and this is a continuation of roster construction. Kind of being mindful of your draft because I think it is the most important thing for the season. And I think this year even maybe more so, and it depends on how your league's set up. So we have extra bench spot in a league, a IR spot. It might be a more difficult year based, people having these soft tissue injuries and practice and being ready for the season as well as COVID concerns. So I think it's important to be um, prepared and being, but you got to be smart with your draft anyway. So that's the most important thing. In years past, I've been able to pick people off the waiver wire and stuff. As people are getting sharper, it's harder because you have analysts and people say, "Hey, grab this guy," where there used to not be as much information. So now I'm finding myself, over the years trying to grab people 2 weeks ahead of time, thinking that that player's next game's probably not going to be as good, but uh, further. But my point of trying to make is even if you have I guess, somewhat of a bad draft, so to speak. I think in years past you had more, and you still could, it depends on the league that you're in. You could have more room to maneuver around on the waiver wire. Um, and that's always been fun for me. I've always been very active on the waiver wire, and you'll probably notice there's the same people in your league are probably more active and some are less active. Um, Maybe the less active ones had a better draft. I don't know. But I'm always like trying to find angles and edges, and sometimes I'm being contrarian, and sometimes I'm playing the fantasy or a redraft league, sometimes even like DFS, if someone is a power play or something. Um, Years ago, I can't even remember his name, but there every time a Chargers player got hurt, wide receiver, Sayer Joe Tutu, something like that. There would always be some guy that you're like, he's going to be like the power move of the week or something. And then sometimes he might go off or whatever. And it's always fun doing that versus, if you're wide receiver, your running back has a hard schedule. But, anyways, regardless of you trying to be able to maneuver through the season, the goal is obviously try to have the best built draft as possible so you're not moving around as much and having kind of a good built team. So I want to go over the last thing, or the last video I went over 2 QB league, and it wasn't for the purpose of going over 2 QB. It was just kind of showing, for one, a draft that went my way for the position that I was in, as well as going over a couple individuals that I thought had a good draft and it made sense for that type of league, as well as someone that I didn't think drafted as well in that particular league. So that's the point of it. It's trying to look at it so you can see errors so you don't make the same errors in your league. Again, regardless of the construction. Now, half PPR is obviously a lot more popular, as well as PPR. I'll be going over half PPR here in this league, or in this video. And in the next article, I think I'm just going to kind of go over um, script. So just like games end up in a script, um, life even ends up in a script. You haven't seen someone for a while, you kind of go in the same script back and forth as if it's been pre-written out. People say and do the same things, go through the same motions, even in relationships. You might say the same things over and over again. But anyway, drafts have scripts, where I think it's important to have these boards here. Again, I use Fantasy Pros. You don't have to use that. I'm sure there's something out there, or you can just write it on a piece of paper. But being able to visualize this, it's nice to see because, for example, I smell victory here. Um, and I'll go over what my strategy was in this. But when I talk about script, I'm talking about, so if this player's has running backs here coming here to me and going to him next, I know more likely he's going to take a wide receiver. So I wasn't even expecting Allen Robinson to drop this low, but since he was right there, I know if I pick a running back right here, I know that he's going to, more than likely, probabilities, he's going to pick 2 wide receivers, which he did. He's also, I talked about this in the last video, is know your teammates. So he is a Giants fan. So Odell played on the Giants, and he also followed the Browns, likes the Browns, followed them when they were doing Hard Knocks. So he had Landry last year. But regardless, Odell is probably the best pick right here. But either way, the probability was he was going with the wide receiver, regardless of what type of player he is or team that he likes. But that also adds to it. So he picks wide receivers. Now, if I pick a running back here, then maybe he does take Odell still, but he probably takes Odell and Allen, I would believe. Maybe he doesn't, but I believe he would. Um, Meaning it's smarter for me to go game theory, basically, to pick this. So that's important in the draft. I'm going over the strategy is not only visualizing this and seeing what's getting picked off, but it helps you as far as what you're picking so you can get a little bit higher value. Now it's easier, obviously, if I'm at the end. If I'm in the middle, it's going to be harder to predict some of these things, but you can still kind of see how things are playing out. I'm fortunate enough to be at the end. So going more so into I'm going to go on a slight tangent, knowing your players. This player I always have, he always goes running back heavy in the draft, but I didn't think he was actually going to do in this one, which ended up creating problems for myself, which I'll go over later. Um, this player always gets a QB early. Been playing for 10 years. First one to pick a QB. Not that that's a bad pick, but he consistently does that. So Browns fan right here. Took Chubb pretty early, way earlier than you should, but he's going with the motions. And I'm from Cleveland as well, Browns fan, but I'm not going to take Chubb in this position. Um, you know, so some of the same players have the same tendencies is what I'm getting at. And also this player also tends to go running back heavy um, in the league, which worked well when we were a standard league, but not in half point PPR. I don't know if he's adjusted much to the half point PPR. Maybe he's done a little bit because he's got Cohen and Coleman, but he always gets a few running backs. So, anyways, draft script. When I'm talking about draft script is just kind of seeing where the flow of the draft is going, so you can kind of predict who may be available in a particular round or next round or whatever. Okay. Now, another type of script in drafting is I didn't preface this video, by the way, but I don't know if people go in depth or talk about these roster constructions. I'll stop babbling on about stuff, but I just wanted to go over this real quick just because drafting, again, as I said in the beginning of the video and the video prior to, is really important. Anyways, the other type of script is actually you scripting out your draft a little bit, just as a coach would the beginning, the first 7 plays of a game. So I think you should try to script out outcomes of the draft as well as tangents or variations. So if something doesn't go your way, you can branch off. So basically like branches or alternative reality. This is like Rick and Morty or something, whatever. You get what I'm saying. So if something doesn't go your way, like, if I'm initially thinking maybe I didn't think Clyde was going to fall, but I wasn't sure about Clyde, but he was a player that I was targeting, and if I wasn't going to get him, I was going to probably go the 0 RB route, which I kind of went with, even though I should have made one change, and I was aware of this already, but I'll tell you in a second why I decided to go this route. But anyways, try to script out your picks and then look at I wouldn't look at average draft position, so to speak, because you're talking so much different data, and this is just your one league. It's going to happen one time, and you don't know. It's just like stock. You don't know what emotion someone's going to have when picking a player in the moment versus um, whatever. And every league's different. But anyway, scripting it out ahead of time at least gives you an idea. And so if something goes wrong, you're not as worried about it because someone can easily go on tilt. I try to zone out when I'm doing the draft. I'm the commissioner, so people are texting me or be like, "Oh, this took this player or whatever." That's just a bunch of noise. So I just put the phone down and let that person text multiple times, whatever, and just kind of go through. But so again, scripting. You got your draft script, and then you also have your script of scripting out the players that you think you want to get. So I think I covered that enough, and then branch off if things don't go your way, so you kind of don't have a certain expectation or outcome. When you do that, if you play it out in your mind that you may not get the guy that you want, um, then you open up. Then you've seen it before. It doesn't matter. Um, because you've seen that outcome, so you're not worried about it because you played it out in your mind. Uh, so I want to go over this as far as the last video I went over like mistakes that someone else made. So I'm going to go over my picks here and my strategies, and it's for the purpose of things didn't go my way, and so how I pivoted doesn't mean that I pivoted right or correctly, but I at least pivoted and try not to let it affect my actual roster construction, because that's the point of this. At the end of the day, the roster construction is the most important. So this half point PPR is like your standard setup: one QB, two running backs, two wide receivers, a flex, tight end, defense, kicker, whatever. Okay. Um, so my goal in this draft was basically your goal really should pick the best player off the board. I thought in this position, and when I say look at ESPN and Yahoo, look at where those players are going in the setup of your league. So in ESPN, they have James Conner further down the list. They have Chris Conner a little bit down. They have DeAndre Hopkins kind of up here, which I feel is a little bit early for him. So depending on if you're doing Yahoo, like Yahoo has Juju down. This is an ESPN league, but I'm just giving you an example. So if you see a player further down the list, that means you may have a greater chance of picking up that player um, later on and not reaching too early. Doesn't mean it always goes that way. So some players don't, it doesn't matter how far down the list, they're going with what's the next best available, as we'll see here in a moment. So in ESPN, since James Conner is a little bit lower, Chris Carson, Jonathan Taylor, they're around that same area. And this league is typically a running back heavier league. But I went in with the thought that James Conner would fall as he did in mocks. And so basically what I was hoping for here at the tail end, since say I didn't get Clyde here, I'm not as big on Josh Jacobs. Mixon's fine. I'm always they're at a good pace. The Bengals. I guess I'm just always worried about his receiving a little bit and his. I know he got the extension and stuff, and I'm probably lower on Mixon than needed. But the Bengals' opportunities for scoring and stuff like that is always baked in my head. I really also like Drake. Now, it doesn't mean that Drake's going to be on the same pace as he was at the end of last year because Arizona went to the running scheme, um, even though they started off the year passing. And I don't know if Drake's going to be on that same path as he was because they got Hopkins and now they're able to do what they wanted to do before. And I'm going on a huge tangent here, but at the end of the day, I do like Clyde, I like Drake, I like Aaron Jones, but I decided just to go with the wide receiver route. And I could have picked the running back right here, but basically my strategy was hoping, I guess, that James Conner would fall to me right here. And if he didn't, I could at least get Chris Carson as a backup if my play didn't work out. Um, but it didn't work out that way. So this team I did think drafted well. But with all these good wide receivers right here, I really didn't see. And that's why, and it depends on the position you're in. And I know that I'm talking the 11th position. Um, I'm not going to go through every single one, but obviously look to see what makes sense in your position, in your draft. Um, and it seems to be the strategy to probably take a running back in the first three and then wide receivers, and then come back to running back, depending on the position that you're in. Like, I'm fine with taking Christian McCaffrey, taking 2 top tier wide receivers, and then coming back for a running back down here, even though it did get super thin and he probably should have taken Cam Akers or DeAndre. I don't think he read this year. Obviously you're going to have a lot of players with COVID and stuff. They haven't been paying attention, so you can have a little bit of an edge. But anyway, so James Conner, Chris Carson gets taken. And again, I didn't input it in my strategy. He's a running back heavy guy. I didn't think about it. He's way ahead of me. And man, uh, he was probably worried that by the time it got back around to him, that these second running backs that like you aren't afraid of, that you're safe with, weren't going to come back around. That probably influenced his pick here. But man, there's so many good wide receivers here in a half-point PPR with Juju and Thielen and DJ Moore, Allen Robinson. Cooper is still good. Maybe he has less targets because of CeeDee Lamb, or who knows? Maybe it's evened out and it's fine. But with all these guys, man, I really thought these guys were going to drop, and they didn't drop. So, in retrospect, in hindsight, I probably should have went with or running back, wide receiver, because I would have had enough room coming back here where I'm fine with James Conner as my top running back. Yes, there's an injury scare, but if not, he's going to be a top tier running back if he doesn't get hurt. So I was fine with taking him first if it happened to be that way. So anyway, since it didn't, it would have been better off because I didn't, you know, having them grab these two guys, it really slid the wide receivers over. And so there was more than enough wide receivers in this group here where if I picked a running back here, I would still have, say, Robinson. I could take Woods. I could take Kupp. I could take Lockett, Ridley, my man, who I don't know why people are scared because of the Redskins. Terry McLaurin should not go all the way down here. That's stupid. And that also affected me as well with this guy, as I'll go over in a second. So I'm rambling on. So this didn't go my way, essentially, because I didn't get James Conner, but I still got 3 top tier wide receivers. I didn't expect Allen to drop right here. So now my wide receivers are done, or my 2 wide receivers and my flex spot are done. So now I'm targeting running backs, getting back to the point of this, which is roster construction. So now I need running backs. So all those guys are gone. So now I'm down to Taylor and Gurley. I was bouncing between the two. Decided to go Taylor. But now I still need running backs. Okay. And I left myself a little bit thin, I guess, and not as much outs. But I did have an out because, again, if James Conner. So my goal at this point, which was already somewhat scripted out ahead of time, is I had it in my mind if I grab James Conner, I'm going to come back and get some, people like James White, J.K. Dobbins, maybe Tariq, um, people like that, because I still have a good running back. But what ended up happening here, this guy again is a running back heavy guy, but it depends on the situation. And I didn't think this situation was going to run into, so I didn't think I was going to get Hunt back on this end right here. And I was fine with Mark, but what my strategy was, regardless of what running back I got here, I was going to grab Mark and I was going to grab Dobbins later to kind of hedge my bet there. He took Hunt fairly early. There's a lot of people available. It still worked out for him. And I wasn't thinking tight end, so he still has a good draft. He's got Michael Thomas, probably somewhat of a force pick right here with all these guys taking running backs. Maybe a little bit of uncertainty with Clyde, but he's kind of in a force position right here unless he takes Mixon. But anyway, right here he has a top tier running back. Getting a tight end right here is probably fine. But Hunt, I thought he took a little bit early, but again, I wasn't expecting. So that's someone again that I was targeting, but I didn't expect. I expected him to go around here, or possibly, if I'm lucky, he moves 2 over to me. But he would have got Hunt right here. McLaurin being down here gives him his wide receivers. and that's a great pick. Terry McLaurin should go. Man, McLaurin down here does it. So what that does is that rounds him out here. And I was still thinking he would go another wide receiver. Um, so in ESPN, James White, J.K. Dobbins, Zach Moss, and Tariq Cohen are all in this bubble area around the 80 to 90 mark. So when I try to have some foresight or kind of do my scripting, so to speak, I look at the um, man, this was 20 minutes. I look at the who I think is going to be available. It doesn't mean they're going to be available, but I feel like I'm going to have enough to choose from. So I thought when it got back to me here, now I do want to go over. I'm typically a late QB guy. This year is probably one of the only years I guess I'm reaching slightly. And I take Dak. Dak has a good schedule. I think he's going low enough. But I really thought that I have enough room here looking at it, that I would have enough room to get some running backs in the back end to kind of cover my mistakes with running backs. And as you can see, out of this whole section in round 6 and 7, only 4 running backs got taken. So again, looking at draft flow, or script, things were playing out in enough favor to where I thought I was going to be good to go on the back end getting 2 running backs here. I think these are a little bit out of place. They're good picks. They're excellent picks. And he's a little bit sharper, but I didn't think that these guys would be off the board. And again, he took 2 out of the 4 running backs in this situation where I think typically more wide receivers are going. Um, Will Fuller, I guess as you get to this point, it doesn't matter. You're going to have a running back get taken off. But anyways, I really thought those guys were going to be available. So he took Dobbins. James White was still one of my picks. But this threw me off because it didn't throw me off, but I was expecting to grab either Dobbins and even Moss right here with his possible opportunity. Even though I think there's a little bit of mouths to feed as far as Josh Allen running him and Devin, even though Devin's fumbling and all that stuff. So they're really talking up Moss, it seems like, setting him up for the story as far as him taking over. Who knows how the season plays out? It's not that Devin was good last year, so I don't think he all of a sudden is a bust or something now. But either way, I kind of like these guys at the spot, and I don't know exactly. Again, he's a little bit closer to range. Dobbins definitely again is in this range, and I do understand his logic behind it. Of taking him here. So since that threw me off, or didn't, threw me off a little bit, I took James White. I got Gibson here, um, and all that stuff. So I guess my point of this, besides roster construction, if things don't go your way, don't let it mess up your draft. Still build your roster construction to where it makes sense. I've got 2 wide receivers, my flex taken care of, my QB's taken care of, and then I'm getting enough running backs here to kind of cover up my running back issue, so to speak. Um, and then I knew, since I already have solid wide receivers, even though there's some good spotty wide receivers here in this section, like Ayuk, and Paris Campbell, maybe the slot guy, maybe the new Keenan Allen for Rivers. Um, if Preston can get over his ACL, but that all depends on if Fitzpatrick's actually going to play the whole season. So there's a couple good wide receivers here, but I knew people weren't going to target like Deshaun Jackson. So I'm already set at wide receiver. So I knew, even like, this is a dumb thing that I don't do. I stream defenses, but I'm keeping my roster a little bit tighter this year. I usually have 2 defenses that I rotate throughout the year, and I grab them like a week before the next one's ready. So I'm kind of like playing musical chairs, but in a way to where I know my opponent's not going to get that person. But anyways, I wanted to get a defense that I can like sit and not worry about. And then in this whole section, besides maybe CeeDee Lamb, Golden Tate, I really didn't care. I don't feel like I was at a loss here unless I get lucky and pick, say, one of these guys and one of their guys get hurt. But I felt I was fine enough, and I don't think I lost that much, even though I am doing defense way earlier than I need to. I didn't think it was going to hurt me much, and it didn't. So still got Deshaun Jackson. I have an IR in this league, so I'm just putting Alshon on that. I'm, kind of playing the system a little bit with the COVID IR spot. Um, but anyways, roster construction, I still feel I did what I needed to for roster construction purposes. I'm not going to go over who I think didn't have a good thing in here. I think I looked at it before. A lot of guys did some of the kind of the somewhat zero RB. I think this is a good one right here. You take Zeke, you're solid, right? Um, Top tier tight end. Tight end's done. Juju, Calvin, great picks right there, and then you're grabbing, maybe you grab Cam Akers. Either way, right here, that's a good pick. Okay, so you got your stuff done. So I think this is a fairly good beginning part of a draft, right there. But that's it. Pay attention to your drafts. Pick wisely. All these players are good, but it doesn't matter if they're good if you're either picking people that are more landmines, or doing something like being emotional and then taking someone a little bit too early. Um, you know, you got Landry and Chubb here. Um, just do your roster construction that makes sense, that rounds out your team. You're trying to be smart with it. If you don't have a good draft, or you don't pay attention to the flow of the draft, or try to script things out, or try to see what to do if something goes wrong, whatever, I think you're going to come out of the draft better, with a better team, with a greater chance of kind of getting through the season. Because obviously at the end of the draft, people go look at their teams. Someone always jokes around in my league that everyone thinks they have the best team after they get done with the draft. But obviously, there's some people that are, donkeys, so to speak, that don't have the good draft, and you can tell right away on paper that they just didn't have a solid draft, or they even tell you that, like, man, the draft didn't go at all as I thought. Like, this is a draft that didn't go at all how I thought it was, where the other video I did. Um, and so you got to be ready for that. And sometimes it can throw you off to the point where you just don't have a good draft, and then that's your season basically, because there's less people to pull from the waiver wire, or people doing an extra bench in your league because of COVID. That means there's going to be less of a pool to pick from. So you got to be on point with your draft. That's it. So I don't know if this was helpful at all or not. If it's not helpful at all, tell me, like, this is a waste of time, Doug. You don't need to go over roster construction. But again, I think it's important because it's the most important part of your season, is your construction of your draft. And looking at where people possibly made mistakes, I think keeps you from making a mistake yourself, and or not getting flustered in the heat of the moment when you have some picks. Or if you script your outcomes, you're not going to be as flustered, so you're not worrying about the clock winding down to 10 seconds, and then you pick someone and be like, I didn't mean to pick that guy, or whatever. Or you get mad because someone took the guy that you wanted right in front of you. Everyone says that every year, right? You took him right in front of me. That's the guy that I wanted. Yes, it does affect you when it happens like 3 times in a row. I can understand, but you want to try not to go on tilt. Uh, the best that you can, and have outs, even though it's understood if you're in the middle here, every back and forth, your pick is based on what you think's going to happen the next round, but it keeps not happening your way because the person in front of you keeps taking the person that you want, and you can easily go on tilt in that situation. But that always leads to, it's tough. But anyways, man, this is a 30-minute video. No one's got time to watch a 30-minute video. Um, that's it. I'm Doug. This is Naked Bootleg. I actually made a football game, a card game, but I like fantasy football, so I made a section for this thing. And it's still, fantasy football is football related, and people that play fantasy football like strategy, so you may like that game anyways. But I'm not. I guess that's a slight plug for the game, but um, I guess I'm just saying why I'm doing this. But anyways, during this COVID time or whatever, I hope you have a good draft, and try to crush it. That's it. That's my send off. Peace out.